God. My name is Jane Waithera, a member of Disability Awareness Committee. Today is a very special day as we come together to celebrate and create awareness on World Albinism Awareness Day. Now, allow me to introduce to you Jane Waithera, an award-winning disability inclusion advocate, social entrepreneur, and mentor. Jane's remarkable journey and unique perspective has positioned her as a leading voice in the fight of inclusivity and equality. Our guest will share her powerful insights and personal experiences. She will educate us on the challenges faced by persons living with albinism. Through her organization, Positive Exposure Kenya, Jane has been instrumental in promoting albinism education and advocacy.
My name is Jane Waithera. I'm a Kenyan. I have a background in organizational development and management. And on a day-to-day, I work with organizations to support them to become inclusive of all persons, including persons with disabilities. As a side hobby, I work as a mentor and an ambassador to communities of persons with albinism, a condition that I was born with. Albinism is a recessive genetic condition. That means it is a condition that is inherited from both parents, the mother and the father. And what basically having albinism means is that a child born with albinism lacks the skin pigment, all the coloring pigment in their skin, their hairs, and their eyes. So for a child to be born with albinism, in every pregnancy, if both parents carry the gene, there's a 25% chance of having a child with albinism. So the difference between a child with albinism and a child without albinism is very small, because a child without albinism has melanin, which gives that child the color of their descent, like saying the African color or the Indian color or the white color, while a child with albinism then lacks that color, and that's why persons with albinism appear to be pale, very blonde hair, and very clear eyes. I was born in a small village in central Kenya, and as long as I remember, as a very young child first, I knew I was different. At that point, I did not know like I had albinism, but I knew I was different from other children because I looked different. And I could also see from both children and adults, like how they would stare at me and whisper. Children would also like not play with me when they're playing because they thought they would catch my color and things around that. So as young as 5 years old, as a child, I knew very well I was different, and I also thought I was different in a bad way. So growing up, all I remember is really being pushed to the margins of the society. And every time for me, being at home with my family was very comforting and very special to me, because that is the only time I felt that I belonged. But every time I stepped out of our home and went to play with other children, go to school, go to church, I could really feel like I was a misplaced person within the society that I was born in. As a young kid, I have a lot of memories, both from my peers who are children and also from adults. But the ones that really stand out is, for example, we would be out playing with children, and some kids would like cut my skin to see if I would bleed. There are kids who would not even come closer to me because they were scared they would catch my skin color. And that did not go just to the children. Even for the adults, I remember seeing like adults like seeing me pointing and whispering. And you know, that really for me made me believe that there was something really wrong with me. And because nobody ever spoke to me about albinism at those early ages, I really kept questioning myself, like, why am I the only different person? And in our home now, of course, even conversations around albinism never came up. And I recall at around 10, 12 years, was the first time I ever had somebody say that you have albinism. And this was a very coincidental situation because there were these missionaries, like a mission hospital called PCA Kikuyu Eye Hospital, and they were doing an outreach in a church near our place. And in this outreach, my grandmother was called by one of the ladies who was mobilizing and told, like, can you take your daughter to this clinic? And I went to this clinic, and for the first time, somebody said, oh, you know you cannot see well, you need to be wearing glasses. You need to start wearing a hat and long-sleeved clothing. You have a condition called albinism. So you can imagine, like, the years before all along, like, I was so misunderstood, but not because people knew a lot about albinism. I think people really did not understand albinism because even at school, I recall many times I was punished for not writing. But from this eye checkup, I now understood why I could never write in most cases because I could never see what was written. So really, I think the defining moment for me was going for this like mobile eye clinic and subsequently receiving my first pair of glasses from this hospital. And that really changed my life. And from the day I got my glasses, I started now like doing well academically. I was always the best in our school, if not the second. And I started now like taking my space, both in my community and in my school. And I think I went through my education now way better because even with glasses, of course, they don't correct the vision, but they made life easier for me. And I was also able now to do things that I could never do before having glasses. And why this is important, initially I had mentioned the only difference between a child with albinism and one without is the lack of melanin in the skin, the hair, and the eyes. So for a person with albinism like me, all the parents need to know and do is to ensure that from the moment this child is born, they start providing skin care and eye care. And with skin care, I mean they need to start dressing their children well with long protective clothes and making sure they have their eyes checked regularly so that they can have prescription glasses. Those are the only two differences that really are so profound to persons with albinism, but every other aspect of their life is the same with other children. Persons with albinism, especially in our continent, experience a lot of challenges. And I'll start with the challenges that are really automatic to all of us with albinism. Because of not having melanin, the one that gives color in the hair, the skin, and the eyes, we have a lifelong visual impairment. And that therefore means our vision, with or without glasses, is something that cannot be corrected. Number two, we have a lifelong need for skin care. And when I mean skin care, for persons with albinism, on a day when it is sunny or not sunny, the UV rays of the sun are very dangerous to our skin because we don't have that protects people naturally from having sunburns or burning from the sun. So in a day that you say, oh, today the sun is very hot, for a person with albinism who actually has no melanin, that sun is times 200 hot the way you feel it. And the challenge here is prolonged now exposure to the sun and to the UV rays, because even when it is cloudy, the UV rays are still there, can lead to skin cancer. And skin cancer, we all know cancer is fatal. So that is one really like major challenge. And now let's come back to like really the challenges around the socioeconomic status and all that. In most cases, you'll also find that Because of lack of acceptance in our society, most children with albinism are raised by single parents or even guardians. There's always the blame and abandonment, where if a woman gets a child with albinism, the husband will say, no, this one is not from our family, and you end up raising that child alone. And if the woman is not strong enough to like also deal with the society stigma, then they also end up leaving their children. So that is one challenge that is really there. But as we have said, it is in the genes. Being a genetic condition means that the trait of albinism has to be carried by both parents. So with this issue of blame and abandonment, men or women who leave their children with albinism need to know that they carry the gene, and chances of them meeting another person who also carries the gene and having a child with albinism are also there. So when it comes also now to like challenges and the misconceptions around albinism, of course, because many people, it's very misunderstood. Like in Africa, where everybody is black, I think we are the most visible like category of people with disabilities, because you can easily tell this person has albinism, but really the needs have not been looked at. But we have the myths and misconceptions around where people think that persons with albinism like have supernatural powers. I am very sure most of you have heard about the killings of people with albinism and the mutilation for ritual purposes. And this is not something that is phenomenal to Tanzania. The only reason that Tanzania has really been on the spotlight is because they report these violations. But even in our own country, these things continue to happen. But because of the silence that surrounds the issue, people don't talk about it. So what I would want to really say is that we need to like have the right information about albinism, understand albinism, and whether you have albinism or you know someone with albinism, even if you don't have albinism, you need to know what is this albinism condition, how does it come about, and what can I do as a person and as a community to promote the inclusion of persons with disabilities and persons with albinism in particular in the society. So that when you see persons with albinism, don't see them as strangers or people who don't belong, but create a platform in an environment where you are able to accommodate them and meet their needs and support them to integrate back into the society. As a person who has experienced stigma and discrimination on the basis of my condition, I at least understand what it means to be excluded, to be sidelined, and to be left out. But what really inspires me today is that as a child, I grew up as a victim. And like I really grew up like in a society where nobody talked about albinism. But today, my biggest inspiration is that every person I encounter and I educate them about albinism will transform another person's with albinism life. So I want the Janes that are born today not to experience the same challenges and experiences that I had growing up as a child. My biggest inspiration is actually my grandmother. I can tell you to date, my grandmother has never understood the science of albinism, to be honest. All she knows is this child is a gift from God, and there's a reason why she was born in my family, and she loved me unconditionally. And she really protected me. And that inspires me a lot, because to my grandmother, all she did was to accept this child without any information. To me, all I want is to provide information to the society so that we push for more acceptance and embracement of people who are born different. Because sometimes it's not just having albinism that makes people different. There are so many differences in our societies. And what we really need to do as a community and as a society and even as a church is to really ensure that we accept, we embrace, and celebrate those that in our midst look to be different. So the situation of albinism globally, maybe I'll start with talking about the statistics. So being a recessive genetic condition that is also rare, the prevalence of albinism in Africa is 1 into every 5,000 people has albinism, while in other parts of the world is 1 in every 17,000 to 20,000 people has albinism. But the unique thing about albinism is that a person with albinism in Kenya, in Ghana, in another part of Africa, and 1 in Asia, and another one in Europe and other parts of the world, they have the same features and characteristics because the only thing they lack is melanin in their skin, the hair, and the eyes. So because the challenges around health, that is eye care and skin care, and the issue of stigma and attitudinal barriers are experienced by persons with albinism globally, in 2015, the United Nations declared June 13th to be the International Albinism Awareness Day. And on this day, the goal is actually to accelerate the understanding and the levels of awareness of albinism to the society and the public at large. The one thing is, as much as June 13th is the International Albinism Awareness Day, my call and urge to the community is to make albinism a day-to-day conversation, because we are your sisters, we are your friends, we are your wives, we are your siblings, we are your church members. And the way we talk about our members of our communities and associations on a day-to-day is the same way we need to normalize albinism, so that over and beyond lacking melanin, we are all one nation, one community, one church. For more information about albinism and to ask your one-on-one question, you can follow our Facebook page at Positive Exposure-Kenya, our website, which is www.positiveexposure-kenya.org, and you can also reach us via email on contact@positiveexposure-kenya.org. Thank you.
And this brings us to the end of our remarkable journey with our guest today. We hope Jane's story will leave a lasting impact in our hearts and minds. We encourage our viewers to take inspiration, strive to be compassionate, inclusive to all individuals regardless of their differences. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share this video as we continue to create awareness on World Albinism Day. Stay tuned for more inspiring content.